How's it going, everyone? Welcome. Eulier Gonzalez here. So, I want to explore in today's video is the second section of this course taught by Stefan Murek, a French data analyst that then shift to a big data engineers and then also to developers and as an AWS solution architect. But again, this is the need on all of this big company that they have huge amount of data, and first they need some analysts to query the data to get some insights about it, and then find ways to mine or to answer shareholders questions from business wide. Okay, so that's why people from data analysis then shift to be data engineers. Okay, and ultimately because at the end of the day they need to is know how the operations of this business, especially digital business like the web, so they need to become developers in order to now finally make little change or implement new features or bug fix, but to actually have an impact on the business. So that's fine. You can, if you are a data analyst, it is very hard for you to know which part of these, which component you need to touch and where you need to touch to actually is satisfy the shareholders' questions or the business requirements, right? So I get it why data analysts transition from this data engineer and then ultimately as a developers, and because most of these companies are now hosting their entire data warehouse and operations, well, they go with the AWS solutions because they provide now a couple stuff. First is convenience, and second is security, right? So they don't have to handle that their own servers. So they can. It is interesting because they think most of these companies they think that they can get rid of the IT team, but it turns out they need more people because they need people that know which servers or cloud provider they need to use and which more are convenience in terms of economic output. So now the role of the developers that only cares about what is the system and how all of these different components interact to each other, for example, is like how now the data that live in some data warehouse, an SQL database or relational database, key value pair, or a graph-like database, okay? So it's going to live in some computer, some server, some machine dedicated for that exclusively. And we also have now a web server that is responsible for handling all of these incoming requests with high throughputs. And we also needed to develop some user interface that on the client side, they get what they need, all right? So these different computers that they host now single applications to do one thing and one thing very well. This is why now developers and data analysts have share a lot of commonalities, and at the end I think that particular role will also merge because one person can do all, so one person can have much more impact on a business, and at the end of the day that's what this that's where the value is, okay? So you not only are responsible for the day-to-day operations, but also for the insights as well as the decision making. And this is one of the reasons why I really love to work on the software. I have the blessing to work on this. I was exposed to machines and to hardware and in my youth. So my dad actually worked in that, and I have the luxury and the luck to be here, and now understand well how these things actually work, right? So yeah, basically is this. So in order to understand is the AWS infrastructure or the AWS in itself, a little bit of history is useful always for context. Again, this is something that works for me. So based on this, I will assume, or what I can say is that the mind is captured, the mind is seduced based on these stories, and the story that makes sense or not, right? Even though our story that are true to the nature of things or not, right? And here we can talk about religions, but this is something that goes beyond the topic of this. So I mentioned this because a lot of the time, a lot of people, even including me from the past, say, "Hey, I really know. I don't. Why we are looking at this? So why do I even care about the history and all that kind of stuff?" Oh, again, if you're asking that kind of questions, so now then you open up yourself to a new world of understanding. So, AKA, in the case of AWS, uh, because after the dot-com bubble burst, when everybody were hype about the internet and all the things that you can do and yada 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 yada, it turns out that the internet was not something that is going to improve your sex life and so on and so forth, but what few companies were able to move along from this bubble were a couple one, right? And AWS was one of them. They initially start as a bookshelf company that sell books across the internet. That was to me quite interesting. And then now he realized that the business is not on selling books. The real business was to now sell infrastructure to business. So at the 2002, something like that. They don't mention here the story. What? Really? Friends, there you got it. In 2002, I had 22. I had 20. Yeah, I had 22 years old. So my 22 years old back then was very lost. In any case, so in 2002, so they say, all right. So the real deal here is that we develop these internal tools that we offer to our clients, and one of them is the SQS, which is a simple queue service. As a way to now, if you want to host our application in our servers, we now provide is easy communication across all of these different components that I mentioned before. So you have the database, the server, the web API, and then in 2004 they launched this SQS they also in 2003 realized that the infrastructure is the deal. And in 2006, they also launched now not only this service for making all of these different components to communicate, all right, which is at the end of the day, they are just server computers that compute things and store things, right? So these two things that I mentioned, the computation and the storage, is also part of the offering. And that makes a lot of sense. And that makes a lot of sense. So there were smartphones, no doubt about it. And then you realize that's it. This is the deal. All right, we're gonna now not only offer is this service to communicate all of these different computers that do a specific stuff, whether it's a web server, the API rate limiting, the database, so on and so forth, the DNS, but also is we're going to offer is computation and storage, EC2 and S3. Makes a ton of sense. So from there in 2007, they expand to different geographic locations, particularly Europe, right? So Dropbox, Airbnb, Netflix, all of them use AWS as part of the infrastructure. So Gartner Magic Quadrant, which is a IT multinational company that have this quadrant, is interesting. So they is an advisory firm. It's an American research and advisory firm focusing on business and technology topics. And one of them is, hey, in 2024 and also in 2025, so AWS Cloud now has become is the number one cloud server provider. But at the end of the day, what they're doing is just to offer is computation, storage, and the ability to communicate among these different servers easily, right? So because all of this business now, for example, McDonald's or Activision, Netflix, right? So the use case are very specific for their business. So you have now for gaming industry, for logistics, in enterprise backups, storage, big data analysis. So all of this is the all particular use case for this huge business. All right. So something that I'm quite familiar is from web hosting, web hosting, mobile web hosting and social apps, and also for enterprise IT. So for example, backups. So backup and storage and big data analytics here. So here is just to recap about the AWS global infrastructure, which is since this set the foundation of their business. So now the anatomy is the regions, the availability zones, the data centers, and also something called as the edge point or the point of presence, edge locations. So the regions is some service that you can have access to, and because some regions are not allowed to expose some of those servers, the way how you can check look at a region is based on its compliance. So for example, hey, that data won't leave is that regions and among other compliance that your company needs to, or any other one, or in that geographic location. So compliance, the proximity of those users based on that region. If you have access to those servers in that region, so let's say computations and storage, but also is data and big data analytics and machine learning, makes a lot of sense. And the other is the How so? What is this? The cost of those services. Some regions are more cheaper than another, right? Do the legal compliance and obligations in those specific regions, whether it's, for example, Rio and San Francisco, or Oregon, Portland, Washington, Miami, or Europe, you name it. So yeah, the other is that these regions are made by these availability zones, or these data clusters, or data region, data centers, where they are now physical locations with all of these computers highly connected with high bandwidth, high internet bandwidth, and with low latency. And usually, at least you have three of them in one region, in one availability zone. You can have up to six. So this is just to describe this huge overview of the AWS infrastructure and a little bit of history to know more about this. Now, next is to get yourself familiar with the AWS console. And finally, starting to look at one of the services that we are need to go with, and that is because AWS provide now clients to have access to their own resource, and this is now client resource and infrastructure, right? So somebody have to manage that, and this is the IAM. So IAM, identity access management, is made of the roles, or is made of user groups and roles, right? And you have is one root admin that is important for you to keep that password secrets and store it in a safe place. You can create now is users and groups and roles. So with groups, you can have is groups combined, but you can have is different users at different groups, okay? And these are policies that you apply to those roles, whether it's a user or a group. It's a JSON-like object that describes the version of this policy, as well as the ID and the statements indicating that which is the principal, aka the user, the account, the roles, that is allowed or not, based on the effect property, to run or to run these actions on this resource, right? Then you also have some optional properties as well. I also look at how can I create as users, and when you create now your users, it is also important to now set some security protocols. One of them is secure a strong password, and second is and that secure password is to follow is some guidelines there. So hey, let's go to enforce some of the length of your password, so the special character, and so on and so forth. And the other is that I find that interesting and useful, not as a company but also as an individual, is the multi-factor authentication, which is, you can summarize this on what is the thing that you own and the thing that you possess. So that now allow an application to identify you, right? So whether it's a password that you have and a device that you own, and this device will generate now some token to say, hey, let's look at this whether it's the virtual authentication, which is a TOTP, which is time one um, uh, time-based one-time password. Okay, usually is a so you have two formats, whether it's virtual applications like Microsoft or Duo or Google Authentication, and the other is this hardware. So, for example, whether it's U2F, Universal Second Factor Authentication, which is a key or it's a physical device that you plug into your computer, and the other is key key fob or MFA key fob, which is like this trinket that you put on your keychains, right? But this special hardware now generate passwords. And I do think that's something very useful for personal use as well. And they also have some specialized hardware for government agencies, right? So there are a couple industries or companies that sells that, which makes a lot of sense. And this is it for guarantee that when you create a user, you need to enforce the password policies and the MFA, right? And when it comes to create the user and the groups and understand this identity policy access and how you can create these policies based on these JSON-like objects, you also need to know what are the different places where they can have access to your infrastructure. So whether it is through the console, through the web interface, or to the CLI, or programmatically via SDK. So this is the three entry points of the AWS service. And I will argue that for any application, okay, you have these three main doors that they can have access into your house, right? So whether if you access through the web or to the CLI using the AWS CLI, and also how can I set is my local computer to allow me to get access to this by getting is an access key to set or to set up my computer locally, and then started to query which service that I have access to, all right, based on these security policies. And then the SDK, right, which is somewhat similar to the CLI, right? But here you do that when you need for a specific service to have access to those registers, AWS registers. For example, mainly is computations and storage, or the huge spaghetti of service that they have. So that makes sense. And now, because when you write your applications, and that particular application they need to have access to this resource, well, it is important for us to have some way to for security from a security standpoint, how our users are getting here and which service they can have access to. So that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense when you think about that. The other service is the AWS Cloud Shell, all right, or the IAM roles and the AWS services. So the whole point of this is because the anatomy of the IAM service is the users. I mentioned what the users are, and the groups, and you can set policy to each one of those, each one of them. Sorry, and this policy guarantee that who can have access to what, and who can have access to which service and what they can do. Then the then how this user can have access to this AWS service, and how this user can have access via the password and the MFA, these two strategy, and how they can have access through our service, and what are the places where they can get in, okay, via the AWS, the CLI, via the CLI, via the CLI, the web interface, or the SDK. And also you can have access to some of the resource via something called as the AWS Cloud Shell, which is just a way of how you can have access the AWS. It is like accessing through the CLI, but on the web. Yeah. So this places, or this access point, now when you want to look at another part of the anatomy of the IAM, which is roles, this allows you to know a specific service to have access to any of these AWS spaghetti services, right? So to set these roles, again, it follows the same JSON-like object structure. And I mentioned that because from a security standpoint, how do we make sure that these different entities, how can we make sure, or from a security standpoint, it makes sense to know which servers who is access to which services, okay? This is the credentials report is that the credentials report, or IAM security tools, all right, a report that lists all of your account users and the status of their various credentials, and then you have the IAM access or advisor, all right. So, but in any case, the advisors, or the last formerly advisors, okay, these two components of the security from it is the last access, or the accessor access advisor, that say, hey, you can see which user, you can see which servers were accessed by my users and when. All right. So you can see which services were used. So which services were accessed by my users and when. This is the last access, or the accessor advisor, and the other is credential report that say, hey, when this user is now a more grain detail about the users, that say, hey, if this user now set the MFA, when the user will reset the last password, or when the user reset the last password, is this user, when the user reset the last password, Jesus. So when the user reset the last password, when the user when was the last time the user accessed through any service through the AWS infrastructure? When was the last time he reset his password? Did he set up the MFA? So you have now more fine-grained detail about each one of those users. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a ton of sense. Makes a ton of sense. And well, on some of the guidelines and best practice here of the IAM, so don't share your root users, not at all. Keep the password in a safe place. Physical users are one AWS users. So assign user and group to permissions. So create a strong password. Set up the MFA for all of your users. Create role for letting you or for giving permissions to AWS services to your own applications. For example, your own server that want to have access, or Lambda function that want to have access to other resources on the infrastructure. The different access points in your infrastructure via the web interface or the console management or the CLI or the SDK, and also is the AWS Cloud Shell, which is a way you have is running an CLI on the web. It's running an AWS CLI on the web, right? And also, if you want to audit the permissions and who can have access to and when they access to, from a security standpoint, you can check off their credential reports, or to know who, or to know which servers were accessed by my users and when, right? With the accessor access advisor or the last pass. And a common things that happen in all of this, and I think this is because I'm going to look at the exam. A common theme for this is the shared responsibility model. This is more from business wise, okay? From business and legal wise. Hey, I don't want you to blame for misusing my services or anything that is not relevant to the AWS. So AWS is only responsible for anything related to the infrastructure, aka keep up their security up to date, guarantee scalability, their service up, managing their service. This is now getting to the detail of the network applications and network engineering and so on and so forth, that kind of stuff, right? And from the user, or you as a, you are responsible, right? Is for how you use this infrastructure. That's it. That's it. So I do think that was quite revealing, because now it makes a lot of sense to look at the computation. All right. Again, one of the service offering from AWS that say, hey, here we have no computation. So first things first, I look at something called AWS setup budgets, which allow me to set a quota, whether it's daily, monthly, per, but exactly, this is the quotas or the budget that allow me to set, whether it's zero spend budget, all right. Yeah, zero spend budget, monthly spend budget, like this, and at least this two one, right? So you have now the zero spend budget, the monthly spend budget, and then the EC2 basics here. All right. Okay. All right. So it makes a lot of sense right now. It makes a ton of sense. It makes a ton of freaking sense, bro. A ton of freaking sense, bro. Yep. A ton of freaking sense, bro. Okay. That AWS budget, and I know where to look at it. This is part of the global configurations. Uh, you look at billing and cost management. Again, a particularly service that they have, some sort of configuration, setting a quota here, whether it's bill and free tier. This is important because if you want to provide these services to somebody else, right? Um, this is where I'm going to spend most of my time to setting up things and configure that. That makes a ton of sense. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. That makes a ton of sense. That makes a ton of sense. All right. Um. Yeah. Let me recap this.
So we are going to make sure to set up a budget and an alarm for that budget for this course in order for us not to spend any money or too much money. So therefore, we need to go into the billing console. So you can click on the top right of your screen and click on billing and cost management. So as you can see here, I get a lot of access denied. This is because I'm logged in as an IAM user, Stefan, for my account. And I had administrator access, but even though I have administrator access, I cannot access my billing data. So to fix this, you can go into your root account. So here I'm in my root account. As you can see, it just says the name of my account. It doesn't say an IAM user. And then you click on it and you go to accounts. So from accounts, you're going to scroll down, and then scrolling down, you will find the IAM user and role access to billing information. As you can see right now, it is deactivated. So we need to just activate IAM access, and this will allow IAM users to access the billing information if they are administrators. So back into my billing console now,
if
and
they
I
are
refresh this
administrator, they
page,
can look at that.
and I refresh again, and it can take a bit of time. As you can see now, I see my data. So except this for the forecast, because there is a data unavailable exception, so insufficient amount of historical data. Except for this, we can see all my cost information in here. So now let me show you what a billing page looks like for the account that I'm actually using, and I have some costs. So as you can see, we get some information around the month to day's cost, we get the total forecast month for the current month, and so on, and last month's total cost.
Month to date cost 29.83. Last month cost for same period. Oh, that was in 2023. Okay. 48% compared to last month for same period. Okay. Total forecast cost of the current month. 9% compared of the last month cost.
So from this, we can get a few information, such as the cost breakdown by month. So this is when you start seeing some cost. And then we can have a look at bills. So if you look at bills, say you have any cost for this tutorial, for this course.
Okay, on the bills. Amazon Web Service, MA Sarl, service provider.
Let's go into December 2023. So you will find at the bottom of it, charges by service. And so you'll see the number of active services. Right now I have 28. And for example, if I look at the Elastic Compute Cloud, so EC2, I see I have $43 of cost in EU Ireland. And it turns out that here is the breakdown of my cost.
Breakdown per
so there is some Amazon Elastic Compute NAT Gateway, which is costing me $35. And there's some EBS cost, there's some Elastic IP cost, and so on. And so you can get a lot of information out of just this bill. So in case you see any kind of cost for your account, remember to go into bills, go to the month you're interested into, and then scroll down to get charges by service, where you're going to get a lot of information on how every service is being used and how you are billed for service, which will allow you to break down your bill very easily. Next, you can go into free tier on the left-hand side. So AWS does have a free tier, and you're going to be able to see the current usage and the forecasted usage as well as against what the free tier is. And then you will see whether or not you're going to pass the free tier usage. So if you do pass it, as a forecast, it goes into the red, then you are going to be billed. So make sure you turn off anything that is turned on and potentially costing you money. So this is a very, very helpful dashboard. Okay, so now let's go ahead and set up a budget. So on the left-hand side, you click on budgets, and here you can create a budget that will alert you whenever you reach your thresholds. So let's create a budget, and we're going to use a template simplified, and the first one is going to be a zero spend budget. So as soon as we reach 1 cent, we're going to get a number. So this is very helpful. So the budget name is my zero spend budget. Here you add your email. So I put here Stefan@example.com, and then create the budget. So whenever I will spend 1 cent, I will have this budget send me an email. You can also use another template for a monthly cost budget.
Exactly. This is the anatomy here. Okay. But it makes sense since of course this AWS budget is AWS budget, right? AWS set a budget. Anytime you want to use a service, right? You need to from the root account set so enables the billing accounting information, the billing information. So a root user must enable any admin roles to access the billing information. Okay, the billing and management information, where here you can look at what are the bills, okay, which is which service what are the charge for your service, okay. So what are the charge for your service? Okay, so what are the charge for your service? And a detailed look at that, right? Yeah, in a detail in a detailed list to look at all of your service per regions and the cost associated to that. Okay, this is on the billing, makes sense. And the other is, hey, I want to set up a quota or a budget, whether it's a zero budget and follow that templates, or a monthly budget or a daily budget, okay, daily saving plans and daily reservation utilization.
And here we say, okay, we want to have a monthly cost budget of,
but I do think that,
for example,
then
$10,
after that the
say,
budget,
hey,
I need to
spend no more than
associate
$10 per
some
month on this course, and then
services.
the email recipients are going to be against
you got it,
example.com. And by the way, if you follow this course closely, you should not spend any dollars. I say you when things can cost you money, but if you're careful, you should not spend any money. Regardless, it's still good to set up a budget just to make sure, in case you do mistakes, that you don't have a big bill coming to your way. So now for this $10 budget,
I don't want to have a big bill coming in my way. No, okay. Yeah, I don't want to have a big bill coming to my way. Oh, hell no. Oh, French toast no.
I'm actually going to reach an email.
Let me see if I did this. Oh, it doesn't. Okay. What the French stuff is this? You know, here you allow me to move on here. That's interesting. Okay, because this is the command. Because this is the command. Mm. Mm. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Anyway, this is it. And mm, mm-hmm. Okay. Because it's the same. It's a no. This is not. Alright, multi-login slide here. Alright, okay, good, cool, cool. Mm. Why do you want to have access to the security builder? That's the pretty mind-bending stuff. It's like, I do want is to have access to the, oh my god. I don't know, why do you want to have access to the AWS builder ID? This is not a builder ID, my friend. It's the AWS services. You know what I mean? You have a big issue here. You have a big issue here. You have a French toe big issue here. So I'm trying to not to log into the AWS builder, but this is what they have. Exactly. And they say, hey, you know what? Um, oh, they send me, okay. It's this one. I'm accessing this to, it's to a specific service. That's what happened. I'm accessing to a specific server. Okay, give me this. Signing AWS. Yeah, because I'm signing AWS Amazon. Okay, this is the entry point. All right. So this entry point is this with this, entering in now the MFA code. All right. Sign in and say, hey, not you. And to me, it's like, what the French stuff? What? Oh, it's because I'm trying to access my, not the AWS. Okay. I'm trying to access is via exactly, and then you do this. You sign in, it say no, this is not. Stop being annoying. You say no, this is not. So I'm trying to oh my god, stop being so annoying. The French toast with you, the French toast with you. Okay. Exactly. And now I'm getting into this because I'm trying to access to another services that is not. Okay. Makes sense. So here I am as a admin here. All right. This is my admin here. Right. So far so good. So far so good.
With
So here on the billing, this is identity access management, but I do want to look at the home base, billing and cost management, right? Um, Here I already enable is the um, the admin users to exactly here I'm looking is at all of my bill charged by service. Yes, so far so good. Simple storage service, location service, and all of this, and you can see that per region, right? Makes sense. All right. And the other, this is bill, payment, credit, purchase order, and the other is a free tier where I define is two templates here. Where I define is two templates. Free tier. Your free plan account does not get charged. Credit cover from your pre-planned. Your free access to AWS service will end when your free plan period expires or have depleted all credits. So good, you know, it's like good. data exports, and this is the free tier. I can see what are the quota that I get. Okay, current usage, forecast usage. This is to AWS Glue and key management service. Okay, you can make up to 20,000 requests already free per month. Then okay, exactly. 10,000 requests per month per each one of these services, right? So okay, and then on the budget, you now set up the different budget, whether it's zero budget, monthly, but you have templates here. Okay. Daily saving plans coverage budget, daily reservation utilization budget. I already create that, right? You will be notified via email when any spend above 1 cent is incurred. Template settings, and you can create that or get based on a monthly cost budget. I do think that I create this is on what on the administrator. No, okay, on the administrator. So it's not here. It's in fact is here, right? And here I can have access via using my alias, right? And I can have access using my alias. Using my alias, which is here, and let's get into this, right? So I'm in, that's right, and now I can have access to this. Exactly. All right, good.
When my actual spend reaches 85%, regardless, we want to have a monthly cost budget.
Is that I already create this monthly cost budget. If I look at the list, my zero spend budget, healthy. So you're gonna receive now a email. In the case of the monthly cost budget, so my monthly cost budget, I don't know what's the name he put it in. $10.
For example, $10.
Okay, so it's like $10 here. So you limit this as to $10. And the email recipient, which in my case will be is the account. All right, and all the AWS services are in the scope in this budget. So you're gonna receive 3 emails when you hit the 85 budget, when you reach 100%, and another for forecast spend is expected to reach 100. So I can create this, but again, I am not going to set anything there.
And say, hey, I want to spend no more than $10 per month on this course. And then
I want to spend no more than $10.
Stefan@example.com. And by the way, if you follow this course closely, you should not spend any dollars. I say you when things can cost you money. But if you're careful, you should not spend any money. Regardless, it's still good to set up a budget just to make sure in case you do mistakes that you don't have a big bill coming to your way. So now for this $10 budget, I'm actually going to reach an email when my actual spend reaches 85%, and when my actual spend is going to reach 100%, and if my forecasted spend is expected to also reach 100%. So very helpful. I have 3 emails I can receive from this, and I'm going to create this budget. So as you can see, well, my zero spend budget has already been exceeded because, well, I've spent some money this month, so I'm getting an email right away at this address. So with these budgets and access to the free tier on the left-hand side to explore, as well as accessing your bills breakdown on the left-hand side, you should be able to debug any kind of costing issue and billing issue you have on this course. And this is a skill that is
Yep. So the whole idea of this is to debug is your budget deficit or your budget here.
going to be necessary for you when using AWS. All right, so that's it for this lecture. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture.
All right, good.
And on EC2, in which we will create our first web.
Wait, what? French services? Okay.
And on EC2, in which we will create our first website on AWS. So what is Amazon?
Okay. So here I'm going to create my first website in AWS.
On EC2, well, EC2 is one of the most popular of AWS offering. It is definitely used everywhere. And what is it? Well, it stands for Elastic Compute Cloud, and this is the way to do infrastructure as a service on AWS. So EC2 is not just one service, it's composed of many things
Elastic
at a high level.
Compute Cloud.
So you can rent virtual machines on EC2, they're called EC2 instances.
ECC.
You can store data on virtual drives or EBS volumes.
Okay.
You can distribute load across machines, Elastic Load Balancer. You can scale services using an auto-scaling group or ASG. And all these things.
It mainly consists in the capability of renting virtual machines, storing data on virtual device, in virtual drive. Storing data on virtual drive, distributing load across machines. Elastic compute. Okay, Elastic Compute Cloud. Elastic. I don't know what the French source is. BS. Elastic Cloud Compute or Elastic Compute Cloud. Elastic BS storage. Elastic, and by elastic I mean this is scalability. All right. An elastic distributed load machines, and is scaling the service using auto scaling group. Okay, scaling the service using an auto scaling group.
Do not worry, we will see in depth during this course. Knowing how to use EC2 in AWS is fundamental to understand how the cloud works, because as I said from before, the cloud is to be able to rent the compute whenever you need on demand, and EC2 is just that. So EC2, what can we choose for our instances, so our virtual servers that we rent from AWS? So what operating system can we choose for our EC2 instances? 3 options: Linux, and it's going to be the most popular, Windows, or even Mac OS. How much compute power and cores you want on this virtual machine, so how much CPU. Then you need to choose how much random access memory or RAM you want, and how much storage space. So for example, do you want storage is going to be attached through the network, and we'll see about it with EBS or EFS, or do you want it to be hardware attached? In this case, it will be about it. So for access, or the cloud is to be able to rent the compute whenever you need on demand, and EC2 is just that. So EC2, what can we choose for our instances, so our virtual servers that we rent from AWS? So what operating system can we choose for our EC2 instances? 3 options: Linux, and it's going to be the most popular, Windows, or even Mac OS. How much compute power and cores you want on this virtual machine, so how much CPU. Then you need to choose how much random access memory or RAM you want, and how much storage space. So for example, do you want storage is going to be attached through the network, and we'll see about it with EBS or EFS, or do you want it to be hardware attached? In this case, it will be an EC2 instance store, and with a whole section on storage, so don't worry about it. And then finally, the type of network you want attached to your EC2 instance. So do you want a network card that's going to be fast? What kind of public IP do you want? And finally, we need to handle the firewall rules of our EC2 instance, and that is the security group. And I lied, finally, there's the bootstrap script to configure the instance at first launch, which is called the EC2 user data. So we have lots and lots of options, and as you'll see in the hands-on, even more options at other certification levels that you need to know in EC2 instances. But at the core of it, what you need to remember is that you can choose pretty much how you want your virtual machine to be, and you can rent it from AWS, and that is the power of the cloud. You can do this by just in the blink of an eye, really. So it is possible to bootstrap our instances using the EC2 user data script. So what does bootstrapping mean? Well, bootstrapping means launching commands when the machine starts. So that script is only run once, and when it first starts, and then will never be run again. So the EC2 user data has a very specific purpose. It is to automate boot tasks, hence the name bootstrapping. So what tasks do you want to automate usually when you boot your instance? Well, you want to install updates, install software, download common files from the internet, or anything you can think of, really. Anything you can think of. So it could be whatever you want. But just know that the more you add into your user data script, the more your instance has to do at boot time. Simple, right? By the way, the EC2 user data script runs with the root user. So any command you have will have the sudo rights. Okay? So this was a short introduction to EC2. Don't worry, it's going to get very, very practical very soon. I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome. So in this lecture, we are going to launch our first EC2 instance running Amazon Linux. So for this, we'll be launching our first EC2 instance, which is, well, a virtual server, and we'll use the console for this. We'll get a high-level approach to all the various parameters you have when launching an EC2 instance, and you'll see there are many, but we'll learn the most important ones. And then we will launch a web server directly on the EC2 instance using a piece of code we will pass to the EC2 instance that is called the user data. Finally, we'll learn how to start, stop, and terminate our instance. So let's get started and launch our first EC2 instance. For this, I'm going to go into the EC2 console, then I will click on Instances, and then click on Launch Instances. So in there, I'm able to launch my first EC2 instance. And to do so, I need to add a name and tags. So the name is going to be my first instance, and that is the name tag. And if you wanted to add additional tags to tag your instance differently, then you could click there. But you don't need to click on this. Using just name as my first instance is good enough. Next, you need to choose a base image for your EC2 instance. This is the operating system of your instance. As you can see, there's a full catalog that you can search from, but we're going to use the ones from the quick start that are very, very helpful. And the one we'll be using is the Amazon Linux, which is provided by AWS. So in it, I will choose the Amazon Linux 2 AMI. And as you can see, that one is free tier eligible, so we'll just leave it as is. So this gives me an Amazon Linux 2. And the architecture I will choose is 64-bit x86. So everything left pretty much as a default. And we'll see in this section and moreover, and the other ones, that you can create your own AMIs and you can find them in here. Okay, but currently we're just going to use the ones provided by AWS as quick start. Next, we need to choose an instance type. And so instance types are going to differ based on the number of CPUs they have, the amount of memory they have, and how much they cost. As you can see right now, I have a T2 macro selected. This one is free tier eligible, so it will be free to launch one of them during an entire month if we leave it running. So this is what we'll be using. But in here, you could scroll down and look at other types of instances. For example, T1 Micro is also free tier eligible, but that's older generation. And as you can see, you have a bunch of instances right here available to you. Some of them are going to be free tier eligible, some of them will not. And by default, the one that's going to be free tier eligible is a T2 Micro, so we'll be using that one a lot. If you wanted to compare the instance types, you would just click on that link and it shows you all the type of instances in here, as well as how much memory they have and so on. So right now we'll be using a T2 Micro. Okay, next, a key pair to log into your instance. So this is necessary if we use the SSH utility to access our instance, and we will be using the SSH utility in this course. Therefore, it is required for us to create a key pair. So as you can see right now, there's no key pair, and we cannot we could proceed without a key pair, but for now we won't do this. So let's go ahead and create a new key pair, and the name is going to be EC2 tutorial. Then you need to choose a key pair type, so we'll be using the RSA encrypted. Okay, this is good. And then the key pair format. So if you have Mac or Linux or Windows 10, then you can use the .pem format. If you have Windows less than version 10, for example, Windows 7 or Windows 8, then you can do a little shortcut and directly use a PPK, which is going to be used for PuTTY, and PuTTY is how you do SSH on Windows 7 and Windows 8. So remember, anything else but Windows 7 and Windows 8, choose .pem, else use PPK. Okay, that should be clear enough. I'm going to create this key pair, and it is downloaded for me directly. So now it is selected automatically here. Next, we have to go into network settings. So for now, I will not touch anything. My instance is going to get a public IP, and then we need to connect to our instance. And so for this, there's going to be a security group attached to our instance, which is going to control the traffic from and to our instance. And therefore, we can add rules. And the first security group created will be called launch wizard 1, so created by the console directly. And we can define multiple rules. So the first rule we want to have is to allow SSH traffic from anywhere. So we leave it as is, and this will create a rule in our security group to allow SSH traffic. But we also want to allow HTTP traffic from the internet, so we'll take that box, and this is because we're going to launch a web server on our EC2 instance, so we need it as well. As we're not going to use HTTPS for now, we don't need to tick the second box. Let's configure the storage, so then we can configure the storage, and as we can see, we have an 8 gigabit GP2 root volume that we'll leave it as is, okay? Because in the free tier, you can get up to 30 gigabytes of EBS general purpose SSD storage, so this is good. And we only have one volume necessary. If you go into advanced, you could configure them and see a little bit more information, okay? And the one important thing to note in here is the delete on termination. By default, it is enabled to yes. I just did advanced to show you that one detail, okay? That means that once we terminate our EC2 instance, then that volume is also going to be deleted. Okay, so we leave everything as is, and we'll get back into the simple mode. Okay, next for advanced details, this is where it gets interesting. So I will skip spot, I will skip IAM instance profile, don't worry, I will go over them once we need to explore them. I will skip all of that, so let's scroll down, let's scroll down, let's scroll down, all the way to the bottom, and at the bottom, there is user data. User data is when we pass a script, so some comments, to our EC2 instance to execute on the first launch of our EC2 instance, and only the first launch. And therefore, on the first launch, we want to be able to pass these commands right here. So for this, you go into your code, you go to the EC2 fundamentals, and then the EC2 user.sh file, you copy entirely this, so all of it, and then you paste it here. So you paste everything, and that means that this script is going to be executed when the instance is first started, and only once, okay, in the whole lifecycle of the instance. And what it's going to do is that it's going to update a few things, then install the HTTPD web server on the machine, and then write a file, an HTML file that will be a web server. And so you don't need to know code or know these commands, okay? This is provided to you to illustrate a few things on this lecture. So finally, for summary, we want to start one instance. This is great. And we can review everything we have here. It all looks good. We are very happy. And as you can see, in the free tier, we get a first year of 750 hours of T2 Micro, which is running it for 1 month. So that's every month. And if you don't have a T2 Micro in your region, then it's going to be a T3 Micro, okay? And then also we get 30 gigabytes of EBS storage and so on. So let's launch this instance, and the instance is going to be launched. Let's go to view all instances, refresh, and now my instance is in pending state. So it's going to take about 10-15 seconds for the instance to come up, and the first started, and only once, okay, in the whole file. And to start one instance, this is great, and we can review everything we have here. It all looks good. we are very happy. And as you can see, in the free tier, we get a first year of 750 hours of T2 Micro, which is running it for 1 month. So that's every month. And if you don't have a T2 Micro in your region, then it's going to be a T3 Micro, okay? And then also we get 30 gigabytes of EBS storage and so on. So let's launch this instance. And the instance is going to be launched. Let's go to view all instances, refresh, and now my instance is in pending state. So it's going to take about 10-15 seconds for the instance to come up. And this is the whole power of the cloud. Thanks to the cloud, I am able to create an instance or
exactly.
100 of them very quickly,
like
in less than 10 seconds, without me owning any single server. So that is extremely powerful, and we just scratched the surface of the power of the cloud, obviously, because the course is just getting started, but you can get a feeling of the advances and the speed we can have on the cloud. So this instance will be run for So as you can see now, my instance is running, and right now I want to show you quickly an instance in Chrome. Here, it all looks good. We are very happy. And in your first year includes 750 hours of T2 Micro, of T3 Micro in the regions in which the T2 Micro is unavailable. Instance using the free tier, AMIs per month, 30 gigabytes of EBS storage, which is virtual drive, and 2 million input and output. Okay, plus 1 gigabyte of a snapshot and 100 gigabytes of bandwidth to the internet. As you can see, in the free tier, we get a first year of 750 hours of T2 Micro, which is running it for 1 month. So so in my free tier, I have this only for a month. Exactly. It's every month. And if you're it's not every month, because it tells you it's in your first year includes 50 hours of T2 Micro or T3 Micro. In your first year, it includes only 1 month of that. T2 Micro in your region, then it's going to be a T3 Micro, okay? Because I don't mention anything of renew. 30 gigabytes of EBS storage and so on. So let's launch this instance. And the instance is going to be launched. Let's go to view all instances, refresh, and now my instance is in pending state. So it's going to take about 10-15 seconds for the instance to come up. And this is the whole power of the cloud. Thanks to the cloud, I am able to create an instance or 100 of them very quickly in less than 10 seconds without me owning any single server. So that is extremely powerful. And we just scratched the surface of the power of the cloud, obviously, because the course is just getting started, but you can get a feeling of the advances and the speed we can have on the cloud thanks to this. So as you can see now, my instance is running, and right now I want to show you a few things, okay? The first one is that the instance name is my first instance, and there's an instance ID, which is just a unique identifier for my instance. There is a public IPv4 address. This is what we're going to use to access our EC2 instance. Or there is a private IPv4 address, which is how to access that instance internally on the AWS network, which is private. The instance is running, and we get some information around host name, private DNS, which instance that we have, so a T2 Micro, as well as, if you scroll down, the AMI we're using, which is Amazon Linux 2, and the key pair we're using, which is EC2 tutorial, okay? So you can have a look at a few details in here. You have more information, for example, on security. We get some information on the security group, which was created called Launch Wizard 1 with these inbound rules. So port 22 accessible from everywhere and port 80 accessible from everywhere. So you should have something similar, okay, if you don't start over because you probably missed a step. And the admin rule allowing all communication outwards, which allows the instance to access the internet. For storage, we saw that yes, we created one volume of 8 gigabytes, so we're good to go. So now let's have a look at the web server running on my instance. And for this, you go on public IPv4 address, you copy this, or you click on open address, and as you can see, it doesn't work. Or if you click on it, copy, and then paste it, you press enter, it's going to work. So it depends on the web browsers you have and so on, okay? But the reason it doesn't work here is that in the URL, you need to make sure that you're using the HTTP protocol. So HTTP colon slash slash and then the IP. Because if you use HTTPS, this is not going to work. It's going to give you an infinite loading screen, which was happening right here. So please make sure to use HTTP colon slash slash and then the IP address, and you're going to get this screen. And in programming, when you do something for the first time, you usually say hello world. So this web server is telling hello world from and this IP right here, which is not the public IP. This IP right here, 172.31.3, actually corresponds to the private IPv4 address. So this is something that I programmed myself. So we use the public IP address to access it, but we have the private IP address in here, and we have the hello world. And if you go too fast, you're going to get no messages. So if you go too fast, just wait 5 minutes, get back to it, refresh this page, and you'll see it. Okay, so cool, we have a web server running. This is great. Now let's explore a few options. So we have an EC2 instance and it's running, but if we don't need it, we can go to instance state and then click on stop instance. And in the cloud, you can start and stop instances just as you wish. And why would you stop an instance? Well, the longer you leave it running, the more you're going to pay, of course. But if you decide to stop an instance, then AWS will not bill you for it. The instance state is kept because you have a volume attached to it, but at least you're not paying for it. So you can see right now, well, the instance is in a stopping state, and if we try to refresh this page, it's going to, of course, it's not going to work because, well, we don't have the server running anymore. So you can see it gets to some like infinite loading experience, okay? So my instance is now stopped, and if I wanted to, actually, I could get rid of it. And in the cloud, it's very common to start instances and then get rid of them very quickly, just to try it out, because this is the cloud and we can do whatever we want. So we can do instance state and then terminate instance. If we do so, we're going to get a warning message, and don't click on terminate because I want to keep this instance with me, okay? But this is how we would get rid of it. So I cancel this. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start my instance again. So I go to instance state and then start instance. And now as you can see, the state is standing, so it is getting started. And I just wait for it to be started in a green state, and I will show you something very interesting. Okay, so my instance is now running. And if I go here and stop the refresh and try again to refresh, as you can see, it still goes into an infinite loop. Well, you may say, well, the server is running, Stéphane, so why is it not displaying the message now? It is displaying here, but like from the old one, of course. So here, the IP start with 54, right? But here, if you click on here, now the public IP start with 3.250.
So
the public IP actually has changed. Anytime. So if you stop an instance and then you start it later on, then AWS will maybe change its public IPv4. So therefore, you need to copy the new IPv4, make sure to use HTTP, and voila, we have access back to our EC2 instance. But one thing that has not changed is the private IPv4.
No, it doesn't terminate.
Will always stay the same, but the public IPv4 may change, okay? So that's it for this hands-on. We've seen quite a lot of things. We've launched our first EC2 instance, which is very exciting, our first web server in the cloud. We've had to look at some of the power of the cloud. You're just using some API calls to stop an instance, start an instance, and so on. So I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, so now let's talk about EC2 instance types. So there are different types of EC2 instances that you can use for different use cases, and they have different...
Okay, oh, makes sense. EC2 instance type, security groups, classic port and port overview. SSH overview, how SSH using Linux or Mac, how to use SSH using Windows, exactly how you connect to that instance, troubleshooting, instant connect, instance role demo, instance purchasing options, and EC2 quest fundamentals. And then the instance storage, all right, exactly. And then the instance storage, interesting. Okay. And then the AWS fundamentals with the LLB and ASG, which is load balancing applications, an elastic load balancer, and auto scaling here. And then with the databases, RDS Aurora and Elastic Cache. Okay, Amazon Aurora and Amazon Aurora hands-on, RDS Aurora and Aurora Security and RDS Proxy, Elastic Cache and Elastic Cache hands-on, and Elastic Cache Strategies. So now storing data in a different service and communicate to that, and then how you manage is the booking or the dictionary for all of this service, and how you can register now is a domain into the holy moly. Okay, and then the VPC fundamental, which is how you can connect to this private network, virtual private computing. And then now how you now store some information here, version information. So now you store this, so you have now a specific server to store data, store images usually, and then how you can have access through that instance via exactly, and how you can have access through those instances here, or the through the access points, how you can have access to the modify policies and so on and so forth. And again, we still with the S3. So for now, for analytics and from a security standpoint, right? And then CloudFront. Okay, and then CloudFront, which is act like a caching services here. Some sort of edge caching. ECS, ACR, and Fargate. Docker in the AWS, and then how you can containerize your applications so they can run on that. AWS Elastic Beanstalk. This is I'm not sure what Elastic Beanstalk it is. All right, beanstalk. Elastic beanstalk. What the French toast is? Elastic beanstalk. A fully managed service that simplifies deploying and scaling web applications. Okay, for deploying and scaling applications. So part of the it orchestrates core AWS EC2. Okay, so it is an orchestration of all of these services. It's an orchestration of the AWS services with its computation, storage, and auto scaling in hard drive to run applications, providing environment for web apps and worker process. Holy moly. Okay, for deployment and scalability, deployment scalability. And then you have now CloudFormation, which is describing is which services that you want. So which services? So with AWS CloudFormation, okay. So with AWS CloudFormation, you describe is the it's a model for describing all of these services in a JSON-like object and manage AWS resources by writing templates here. So this is like Terraform, or an analogy of Terraform, which is infrastructure as code. Here you are, this is from DevOps. So here you are defining is this series of services that you want to have access. This is when you define all of these cloud services for this particular client, for this particular, it's gonna call this here. So this is how you define all of these services for this particular client that, okay, so defining is the infrastructure, or aka defining is the infrastructure, or aka the services for this specific client. Which is something that is not exclusively to AWS but also for Azure and GCP, and it makes a lot of sense with the Terraform. The other is Ansible and Kubernetes and so on and so forth. So this is Terraform. Okay. Holy moly! So this is Terraform. Okay, makes sense. Mm-hmm. 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 All right. All right. Okay. Cloud formation. Okay. Cloud formation using a YAML file or a JSON. And how now the AWS integrating and messaging across all of these different services like this. And then AWS monitoring and audit CloudWatch, X-Ray and CloudTrail. Oh, and then is when the monitoring of all of these services, which, okay, CloudWatch and Amazon Bridge and X-Ray and EC2. And then you have now the AWS serverless, whether it's Lambda and DynamoDB or API Gateway. So now instead of you having to set up a application or a server manually, you're gonna rely on this Lambda function, which is something that is handled for you and it will adapt. Similar for the Dynamo, and it will adapt. And similar for the API Gateway, and it will adapt. And here you have now the exactly continuous integration, continuous delivery, using the code commit and code pipeline, code build and code deploy. I am using this code pipeline to do so, right? Yeah, code pipeline to do so. And here you have is the AWS server, SAM, Serviceless Application Model. Okay. Cloud Development Kit, the CDK. Commands and bootstrapping. Cognito for handling now user authentications instead of relying on other things like Okta and yada yada yada. User authentication and other serverless step functions and app sync here. And app sync, error handling, invoke lambdas and hands-on. So once you know how to deploy your applications and this continuous delivery and continuous deployment, and the users in this service for handling is user authentication, advanced identity, and AWS security and encryption. Okay, so now it has its own services to pull that data. So they are hosting these secrets. Okay. So they are hosting these secrets and AWS other services. So for example, like Athena, Certified Manager, and okay. And then they're preparing for the Epson, AWS Certified Developer Associate. Holy moly. Again, it has all of these different services, but they are based on things, based on a specific things, a specific knowledge. Okay, based on a specific knowledge that is needed right now. So that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.